Hey, my name is Chris Brennan, and this is your year-ahead horoscope and astrology forecast for the zodiac sign of Sagittarius for the entire year of 2024. All right, let's jump right into it. So, your main keywords this year, Sagittarius, are children, sex, friends, home, parents, work, health, relationship, communication, and siblings. So these are some of the main topics that are going to become prominent for you in different ways this year. And I'm going to spend the rest of this rest of this video expanding on each of those topics and why they're important for you as well as how. All right, so here's the planetary movements calendar, and I want to start first by talking about the eclipses that will be taking place in your fifth house of sex and fun and leisure and children, and your 11th house of friends and groups and alliances. So this is a continuation of an eclipse series and some trends that started last year in 2023. And we'll see a continuation of some of that energy of major beginnings and major endings when it comes to these topics in your life during the course of this year, especially during eclipse season, which is around this year, March and April of 2024, as well as there's going to be one more eclipse in this axis in October. So, with the 11th house eclipses in Libra, that's major beginnings and endings when it comes to friends and groups. So, you've been entering a new chapter of your life where there's some new friendships that are starting, and you may meet some people that maybe you don't think it's going to be a major friendship at first, but then it turns out that that relationship grows and develops and becomes much more important in the long term than you anticipate at first. And there's going to be other friendships where you're going to find that you may have reached the end of the life cycle of that friendship, and there may be some friendships that fall away into the past and cease to be as important for you, or come to, in some instances, an ending during the course of this year. So the 11th house also has to do with social groups. So sometimes that can mean like joining a new social network or club, or finding other like-minded individuals that share similar beliefs or participate in similar activities would be a good use of this energy. With the fifth house eclipses, this is major beginnings and endings when it comes to children. So sometimes this can mean children become more important in your life for some reason, either your own children, in terms of, for example, like having children, or in other instances, it can be other people's children that somehow become prominent in your life for some reason. But for some reason, the topic of children is becoming more prominent as a potential topic this year. The fifth house also has to do with sex and sexuality. So there's some sort of theme that started last year that continues into this year of moving into a new chapter in your life when it comes to sex and sexuality, and some major changes that are happening in that area. The final thing is the fifth house has to do with fun and games and leisurely activities and what you do basically for fun. So you may find that there's some things that you used to do for fun that you're no longer enjoying as much, and maybe you stop doing. And there's other things that maybe you'll discover that you didn't know that you enjoyed, but that you start finding a lot of enjoyment in, and you start putting a lot more focus in during the course of this year. So those are the eclipses that will be happening off and on throughout the course of this year. The next thing I want to focus on is the Saturn transit, where Saturn's going to conjoin Neptune this year in your fourth house of home, family, parents, and private life. So my primary keyword for this is nebulous challenges surrounding home and parents. So Neptune's been transiting your fourth house for years now, but Saturn just moved into this house just last year in March of 2023. And typically Saturn represents challenges and surmountable difficulties in the home and living situation. So there may be some things about your home and living situation that are kind of some challenges or some annoyances that are arising this year, or some setbacks that you have to deal with. But because Saturn's conjoining Neptune, some of these issues are kind of nebulous, and it's hard to address them, or hard to really pin down what the issue is or how to fix it. Saturn Neptune also, there's a tension between the ideal versus what's realistic, as well as trying to tell the difference between what's true versus what's false. So for some of you, that's going to relate to your home and living situation and some challenges going on there. For others, it may relate to your parents, either in terms of things happening in their life or in terms of your interaction and relationship with them, and having some surmountable difficulties that come up that you have to work through and deal with, although they're made a little bit difficult by the Neptune part of this, which is the nebulousness and the difficulty in pinning down exactly what the solution is. So some of this is going to become more prominent and more pressing in September, when there's going to be an eclipse in the sign of Pisces that's really going to put the spotlight and the emphasis on this part of your life even more so than before, and more emphasis on your private life starting at this time in September. So that's one of the transits that I wanted to highlight, because it seems like a major one for you this year in terms of just home and parents becoming more of the focus for some reason. All right, let's talk about some of your best transits this year. So one of them is the Jupiter transit through your 6th house of work and health. And Jupiter is going to meet up with and conjoin the planet Uranus. And my primary keyword for this, that conjunction goes exact in April, is unexpected opportunities involving work and health. So when Jupiter transits through the 6th house, it can be a period where sometimes we start focusing on our health more. Uranus has been there for the past 2 years, so sometimes this can cause unexpected disruptions to our health. But when Jupiter comes in, it can provide unexpected solutions and a way to fix or to offset things that were bothering us previously. So sometimes this can be a good time to look into working on your physical health, seeing a new doctor, starting a new diet or exercise regime, and otherwise just pursuing growth and expansion in this area of your life, especially around the April timeframe, because there may be some unexpected opportunities come up which can really help you in this area when it comes to health. So that's the health side of things. The 6th house also pertains to one's work, where some of these similar opportunities for growth may be happening in terms of your workplace. Maybe there's some opportunity to grow or expand at work that you hadn't anticipated before, but it just comes out of nowhere. And if you're paying attention for it, you can kind of jump on it and take advantage of that opportunity. Sometimes the 6th house pertains to subordinates or people who work for you. So for some people, this may be starting to work with somebody that really helps to support you in some significant way, especially in terms of your workplace. So that's one of the more positive transits this year. The other really positive transit you have this year, and the last one, the time frame is from the beginning of the year all the way through May, and then starting in June, the planet Jupiter is going to move into Gemini, which is your 7th house of relationships. So the key word for this transit is growth and expansion when it comes to relationships, partnership, and potentially even marriage. So Jupiter transits through your 7th house are just positive for relationships in general. For some of you, if you're not in a relationship, this may bring a positive relationship into your life at this point. Or if you're already in a relationship, this may bring just opening up a new chapter for you in terms of your relationship with your spouse, and things just going better than usual for some reason during the course of the entire second half of this year. Although it's really going to kick off in June, when a bunch of planets are going to transit through Gemini at the same time, and that should be the focal point. But then Jupiter's going to stay in Gemini for the entire second half of 2024, so that should be very good for relationships. So that's definitely one of the most positive transits that you have this year. And sometimes with Jupiter in the 7th house, it can even be a good time to finalize or take a relationship to the next level, whatever that means in your individual situation. For some people, in the most ideal scenario, it can mean like getting married or something like that. All right, so that is the most positive transit that you have this year. Let's see, other transits going on. So there is going to be a Mars retrograde this year in Leo and Cancer, which is your 9th house of travel and education, and it's your 8th house of shared resources, other people's money, and sometimes topics surrounding mortality. So with Mars retrograde in your 9th house, This is kind of similar where, for example, the Venus retrograde took place last year in your ninth house in Leo. And for some people, they took a major trip because the ninth house represents travel. The ninth house also represents education. So there were educational opportunities. Here with this transit, my primary keywords are tensions surrounding beliefs, travel, and shared resources, because Mars transits can be kind of irritating or can be kind of tense in that there can be more conflict in these areas of our life during the course of this long transit of Mars through this sign. So that could indicate some conflict involving education, and maybe you were going in one educational path, but then you decide for some reason that you have to stop that and you have to go a different path and you have to sever yourself from some relationship or some form of learning that you were doing up to that point. For some people, the ninth house represents beliefs and religion or even their politics. And there may be something about this area that's getting you into greater conflicts during the course of this year, or having some forms of like strife or discord involving your beliefs. I already mentioned travel and the potential for running into some issues with travel at this time, especially long distance travel. The other part of this transit is the eighth house, and the eighth house usually represents shared resources, other people's money, and sometimes this represents the partner's finances if you're in a long-term relationship, and there can be some setbacks or some conflicts involving your partner's resources or involving the role of other people's money in your life in general. So sometimes this can refer to things like taxes, debt, or other things like that. And you're going to want to be careful during this time, not to do things too impulsively, to think things through, and to avoid conflicts in this area, because you could, for example, a scenario could be like you get into a conflict with a partner over some shared resources or shared finances, and what looks like it should just be a little blow up or a little conflict turns into a much larger one that has greater or more long-term implications than you imagined initially. So my main advice for this Mars transit that's happening especially the last 2 or 3 months of the year, is just to exercise caution, to try to avoid doing things too impulsively in this area of your life, and to exercise restraint. Because especially during Mars transits, we can be more irritable and more prone to getting into fights. But if you exercise some restraint, then you should be able to mitigate the worst possible scenarios of this transit just by avoiding starting conflicts that might get out of control otherwise. So that's my main piece of advice. All right. The final transit that I wanted to mention is Pluto is departing from your second house of finances, and Pluto is moving into your third house, which represents communications, siblings, neighbors, and your neighborhood, as well as extended family and relatives. So Pluto transits can indicate transformative experiences with respect to this topic, where for some reason you're drawn in and this area of your life becomes more intense for a period of time. So I think this is going to relate primarily, because it's your third house of communication, to the way that you communicate in the world and how you share what you know or what you believe. And this may draw in the Pluto transit a little bit that's going retrograde later this year, where it's like that's indicating the potential for conflicts surrounding beliefs, whereas Pluto is indicating some issues with how you communicate. So part of this transit may be learning how to communicate effectively and how to avoid some of the darker sides of Pluto, which can be issues with like control or manipulation or power plays. So for those of you that have siblings, sometimes this can relate to your relationship with your siblings and having some issues of like control or manipulation or some darker themes that you have to work through with them. That can also relate to like neighbors and having some issues with your neighbors or other extended relatives and family. The third house can also relate to short distance travel, like how you get around your city, like driving or other short forms of communication. But generally speaking, this is a pretty long-term transit, but I would just pay attention to any changes that start happening in this area of your life next year in 2024, because usually that can give you a preview of some of the major changes that are going to happen in the future as this transit continues to be active over the next few years. So yeah, deeply transformative experiences with communication and neighbors, as well as potentially siblings, but you'll emerge out of some of those transformative experiences in a much different place than you were when you went into it. And even if some of those experiences are challenging, or if they remove or clear the way of certain things in your life, they will then open up the opportunity for other things to move in and fill that spot that may not have existed or happened if that event hadn't happened. So ultimately, it's a positive transit, but it's one that can be very deep and transformative in a way that changes you at a core level. And for you especially, I think changing the way that you communicate is going to be a very core part of that. So it should be a very interesting transit to pay attention to and see how it goes this year in 2024. All right, I think that's it in terms of the major transits that I wanted to cover this year. Here's the major transits that I was talking about. For those watching the video version, here are some of the dates involved in some of those transits. Here's the Mars retrograde transit. And otherwise, I think that that is it for this horoscope for 2024 for Sagittarius. So for a more detailed breakdown of the transits this year, check out my 2024 year ahead astrology forecast on YouTube. Or if you're looking for good dates to do things next year, I just released my 2024 Electional Astrology report, where I went through each of the next 12 months and picked out the most fortunate or lucky dates over the course of the next year. So I'm currently doing a 15% off New Year's sale on that report, and you can get it at theastrologypodcast.com/2024 report. All right, that's it for this forecast. Thanks a lot for watching. Good luck this year, and I'll see you again next year for the horoscope for 2025. So good luck and see you again soon. If you appreciate the work I'm doing here on the podcast and you'd like to find a way to support it, then consider becoming a patron through my page on patreon.com. In exchange, you'll get access to some great subscriber benefits. You can find out more information at patreon.com/astrologypodcast. Shout out to our sponsor for this episode, which is the Chani app, the #1 astrology app for self-discovery, mindfulness, and healing. You can download it on the Apple App Store or on Google Play, or for more information, visit app.chani.com. Special thanks to all the patrons that helped to support the production of this episode of the podcast through our page on patreon.com. In particular, shout out to the patrons on our producers tier, including patrons Christy Moe, Ariana Amour, Mandy Ray, Angelique Nambo, Issa Sabah, Jake Otero, Jeannie Marie Kaplan, and Melissa Delano. If you're looking for a reliable astrologer to get an astrological consultation with, then we have a new list of astrologers on the podcast website that we recommend for readings. Find out more information at theastrologypodcast.com/consultations. The astrology software that we use and recommend here on the podcast is called SolarFire for Windows, which is available for the PC at alabe.com. Use the promo code AP15 to get a 15% discount. For Mac users, we recommend a software program called AstroGold for Mac OS. You can find out more information at astrogold.io, and you can use the promo code AstroPodcast15 to get a 15% discount. If you're really looking to expand your studies of astrology, then I would recommend my Hellenistic Astrology course, which is an online course on ancient astrology, where I take people through basic concepts up through intermediate and advanced techniques for reading birth charts. You can find out more information at courses.theastrologyschool.com. And finally, thanks to our sponsors, including the Mountain Astrologer magazine, which is a quarterly astrology magazine, which you can read in print or online at mountainastrologer.com. And the Northwest Astrological Conference, which is happening both in person and online, May 23rd through the 27th, 2024. You can find out more information at norwac.net.